Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of the Gauntlet, I want to talk about time-traveling Vikings, or Lost Vikings as I'm calling them. If you get the reference without looking it up, you are awesome and we should be best friends. If you haven't watched my airing of grievances, which posted earlier today, I suggest you watch it as it contains a rules issue about this combo that frustrates me. I didn't want it to be a distraction, which is why it was moved to a separate video. The truth is, this is a very good combination even with that complication, but one that is very difficult for me to measure. Two of the seating committee members, Sonus and Cheddarific, swear by this combo, but for me, I did not really rate them well, and I'm starting to believe that I am wrong about them. The problem is that Vikings can be so hard to judge because they drastically alter the shape of the game in unpredictable ways. So for this video, after I talk about the internal team, I'm going to talk about the team through the lens of one of their exhibition games in which they played zombie elder things. At a high level, playing with Vikings is essentially playing with additional factions in your deck. You don't know what cards you will get and how they will synergize with your faction. They could be great fits, or they could be useless. There aren't many bad cards, but there are better cards and worse cards relatively speaking. If I grab one of your worst cards, you are much more likely to draw one of your better cards. But if I grab a good card, then it will really hurt you. The Vikings have a great tendency to steal powerful actions, which is why it's great that they have Time Box to play those extra actions. It's just hard to predict who you are going to face and what cards you'll get from them. I've often found the Vikings to be incredibly strong, but at the same time, they can also be held hostage by a terrible draw order, which makes them incredibly swingy to me, which isn't helping matters. But before I get to the specifics of the exhibition game, let's talk about this team internally. This team greatly benefits for some convenient Viking wording because many of their cards are Timebox friendly. Timebox states, when a card goes to your hand from play or the discard pile, this means that Ransack and Valkyrie actually trigger Timebox, and every little bit helps, because having this Titan out can really help matters. Each counter placed is another turn you get with Timebox, and allows Timebox to come into play at unexpected moments. Shield Maiden is a fantastic target for do-over, as you can repeatedly steal cards from your opponent. You do increase the risk of taking their bad cards, but it comes with the territory. You will need cards in your hand, because the Vikings can be card-starved. I sometimes refer to them as having reverse card draw, because they slow down their own draw and redraw cards they already had, and they rely on effectively drawing from someone else's deck instead. It's what makes Tribute so important, which is a great candidate for Repeater Perfect, and it's astounding to make sure that the Viking abilities don't keep you from getting to your own better cards. It's so crucial to get to Valkyrie because you could use your opponent's strengths against you. If you can steal two powerful minions in the same turn, they are very likely to synergize together, especially with the teams in this tournament, and the right two minions can be very powerful in the hands of someone else. This increases the chances of having a Viking funeral target that you don't have to put back in the box. And the Time Travelers are going to replay many of those minions. On a smaller note, the Time Travelers do have limited shuffling, which allows you to undo some of those Viking card draw consequences. This may dilute Time Walk, but it also means other players never have access to those cards. Against a team like Minions of Anansi, this can be very powerful, as it makes them have a counter for collecting stories and Emboro Hornets. Huskarls can really hurt you in the early game, but they are great late game, especially when played with Timebox. You just need cards, especially since the extra plays can bleed your hand. Fortunately, the Jumpers serve this purpose well, as they stay in your hand all game long, so that you can have an above average hand size, and they can be the deck fodder you need for Raider. As a Terminal 7 power play, this can be fantastic. There are some anti-synergies that you will need to mitigate. The Viking power boosts are not do-over friendly. Wormhole will shuffle in opposing minions into your deck, which will work against Valkyrie. There is no granularity on Wormhole, unfortunately. Time Raider can be fairly useless because your deck simply stays too large the entire game, but if there was a card you really needed a second chance at, maybe it's a good idea. For this team, the Time Travelers are really playing as support to the Vikings and helping them pursue their own agenda, while the Vikings fill in a few Time Traveler gaps. They have power that the Time Travelers desperately need, especially in combat training, which I've used to facilitate a 2-base attack, since Timebox can play a Huskarl on its base while I attack elsewhere. The idea of a global 2 power, by playing Combat Training and It's Astounding back-to-back, can really go a long way. You also have the ability to get plus 6 power from 2 Berserks. I like having Stasis Field as a means to stall while you regenerate your low hand size because it's very difficult to counter. And Time Walk can be very powerful to play extra minions that can boost themselves at the end of the game, even drawing back some of the cards that you put on top of the deck. But as much as I like to have an overarching game plan for this team, the nature of Vikings requires me to have a separate strategy for each individual matchup. So in the case of Elder Thing Zombies, I could ransack Overrun or They're Coming to Get You. Ironically, my opponent was able to look at my hand and see that I had ransack, so he had to be very careful with those cards the entire game. I had my heart set on They're Coming to Get You for more Shield Maiden shenanigans, but the game led me to take Overrun. When I played Shield Maiden, I ended up taking both copies of Grave Robbing, which was fantastic on 3 levels. First, he didn't get those cards, I did. Second, it let me play Shield Maiden again so I could steal more things. Third, Grave Robbing actually triggers Timebox as well, so it brought out Timebox extremely early as a result. The great irony is that, over the course of the game, I also stole a Migo and a Tenacious Z, and then I was able to steal the Elder Thing with Valkyrie, and I ended the game by playing Elder Thing, destroying Migo and Tenacious Z just for fun. A minion I didn't own, destroying 2 other minions I didn't own. It was very poetic. And that's my biggest takeaway from Time Traveling Vikings, in that they have some nice synergies on paper, but ultimately rise in scale with their opponent. Factions that have great cards to steal, that have general utility, will really not want to play the Vikings, but it's still hard for me to predict where they should land. For example, Ghost Vikings work really well together, but do single Ghost cards work in the context of Lost Vikings? Maybe, maybe not. Then again, Haunting is a power 3, so Shield Maiden can steal it. In fact, any faction with printed power exploitation could be a bad fit, but stealing Make Contact wouldn't be a good steal, because the Vikings really don't want to go down to 0 cards. This is probably my hardest team to seed, and I'm just going to accept that truly anything can happen with them, so never count them out. Think carefully with each matchup, and really think critically about what cards you might steal and how you're going to use them. As far as other weaknesses are concerned, the card draw factor can backfire, and this team has no before the base specials. They do have good bursts, but difficulty regenerating their hand, so find a good time to strike when the cards are low. They can only stall 1 minion at a time, and cannot keep up with Swarm factions, and many Swarm faction minions do not make sense in isolation. You may not want to play your best minions with their best minions and beat them there, because then the wormhole might give you the minion back and avoid Valkyrie at the same time. What do you think of Lost Vikings? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.